Oscars notably had a bad, we had a bad run, but all of our eggs were pretty much in the Fableman basket, which
I finally saw the Fableman.
it was good. No, you didn't like it? It was good, right? We liked it. I think overall, we did a screening of it for the temple, so some of us went to see it together. We have our next movie. I just posted it up in the e-blast. We're going to see The Forger next week, a week from Thursday night. We're going to try to do them on Thursday nights. It's one of the few nights we never have stuff. The 7 o'clock on the 20th. So the link is up there, and The Forger is set during the Holocaust. It's a Holocaust related movie. And then we have another movie that we're going to be doing in April that we don't have the link yet for, but it's called Everything Will Be Fine. It's a French movie, but it's also based on a Jewish family, and it's about end of life issues. And according to Greg Lemley, it's very good. And so we're going to do a screening for that at the April 27th date at the Lemley too. So we're trying to do it 7 o'clock. So 7 o'clock on Thursdays. And we're going to get those started again now that the Oscars are over. And today, as we turn our attention, and let me start posting this up on Facebook, when we go to Isaiah today, I mentioned this last week. This is not the most famous part of Isaiah. I am trying to get to Isaiah chapter 40, the beginning of 2nd Isaiah, which I mentioned last week. Somebody asked me, and it wasn't like I was going to just go, hey, 2nd Isaiah is better known than 1st Isaiah. It's difficult to say that, but I will say that some of the most famous lines are in 1st Isaiah. We read them already. They had to do with the prophecies that Christians believe refer to Jesus. But 2nd Isaiah is definitely referenced more in Jewish texts, which we talked about in the last couple of weeks. That the Haftarot mainly come from 2nd Isaiah. The Haftarah we read at Yom Kippur comes from 2nd Isaiah. A lot of the passages come from there. But again, there are some really famous passages that come from 1st Isaiah. So it's kind of like talking about Mel Brooks movies. The complete one is maybe Blazing Saddles, but there's some really funny lines in History of the World. I just compared Isaiah to Mel Brooks, but I will compare Isaiah to, and maybe he was, but I will compare Isaiah to somebody interesting just to think about, or not to somebody, but to some type of people. Isaiah was an interesting guy because, as we know, he's known as being a prophet, but he's also related to the king, to Hezekiah, who we're going to be reading about today. About this time of Hezekiah, we're talking about 730 BCE, when the northern kingdom of Israel was being destroyed, which we're going to read about today. We're reading about the fact that Hezekiah, the king of Judah, is kept captive. We're maybe going to get to chapter, I don't know how close we're going to get to Isaiah chapter 33 today, which is a retelling of Kings. It's almost like the exact part of Kings that we read a few months ago about Hezekiah being under siege. So it's a very weird thing that we actually read Kings and Isaiah and Chronicles. We have 3 versions within the Bible of the same event, slightly different, but pretty close. And Isaiah is also part of the priesthood. So, when we think about in ancient Israel, there was the royalty, the political force, the kingdom. In the south, it was kingdom of Judah. It was the David's family, the Davidic dynasty. In religious terms, it was the priesthood, right? The priests were in charge of religious matters, and specifically the Kohanim, the descendants of Aaron, took power, and we've talked about it before. They centralized the power that the Levites had before. The Levites originally were able to offer sacrifices, and then it was only the Kohanim, and then it was only the Kohanim that lived in Jerusalem. So we see that the religious power, and then we have the prophets who speak to God and speak to the people, or intermediaries delivering messages. They speak to the kings. They have the ability to have the king's ear in some cases. And they also probably in some cases were popular amongst the people, and they're a voice. You know, when we talk about checks and balances in the country today, and by the way, those weren't the only factors in ancient Israel. We had the elders, we had tribal leaders, we had courtiers and people in the courts of the rulers that were also sometimes powerful. So there were other groups too. And, you know, when we talk about it today, checks and balances in America, like if I tell you, you know, what are our checks and balances in America, you go, well, there's the judicial branch, the legislative branch, the executive branch. You know, you'll give me the three branches. But in reality, we know that that's not the only powers we have in America, right? We thought about where power really is in America. There's governmental power, but there's also media power. There's also business power. There's not one, it's not just governmental power. Our governmental power has checks and balances with it, but we've also traditionally had sources of power that are not just the government. And they go up and down in power and in strength, and oftentimes they're related and connected to each other, right? So people who are important in media are oftentimes also important in business or in politics. And of course, like the fear is that one of those groups is going to kind of like, or one of those people or individuals will become all of those things, right? That the media, politics, and business will all coalesce around one person or one family, which is definitely a concern that we have in our world. And we've seen it in our own day where, you know, people have tremendous amount of power. I mean, Jeff Bezos, you know, is got tremendous amount of power because of not at just Amazon, but New York Times and his wealth and you know, and there's people who, you know, who are at the nexus of these things that are not necessarily just rich or you know, but there are people who are powerful because they have access to all these places. I mean, to some extent, I mean, he died way too young, but, you know, John Kennedy Jr. was, you know, involved in publishing. He was involved in media. His mother was, you know, very connected to the business world in New York and the media world. His father, you know, he was part of a political dynasty. I mean, there's people like that in our world who've, I mean, to some extent, you know, somebody like, I don't know, you could think a lot of people. I mean, Anderson Cooper. I mean, there's people who have media presence and who have connections and who have, you know, wealth that are you know, they're all over the place nowadays. But Isaiah was one of those people. Isaiah was one of those people who had connections all over the place to all the levers of power, and he was a prophet. So it's kind of strange in the sense that, like, there's very few people that we meet in the Bible. I mean, to some extent, Moses was one of those people because he was both a political leader and a prophet and a kind of like the guy in charge and I had like all power. But there aren't many people that we encounter historically in the Bible who can, to some extent, like, we know what they did and we know how powerful they were and how connected they were. Isaiah's one of them. So he moved in all these worlds and was respected and was probably one of, and I'm talking about the historical Isaiah, the first Isaiah, the one we're reading right now. He saw things and had access to things that a lot of people didn't have, and yet he was there to call out these people. And he must have been an interesting guy. He's probably one of the more interesting people that we kind of talk about or mention, but we don't really think about a lot, because We don't know that much about his biography. We don't know that much about what happened to him outside of his prophecies, but he was like right there in the corridors of power throughout his life. So that's probably why there was even a second Isaiah, why somebody said, well, this is what Isaiah said too, was because he was that guy who was everywhere. And so let's read a little bit. We're picking up in chapter 28. We're going to see some of the chapters here today are very short. Some of them are longer. And what we finished with last week was the prophecies against the nations, and then what we call the Isaiah apocalypse, which is what Isaiah sees is going to happen in the future with those nations. And that theme is continuing today until, as I said, we get to about five chapters from now, where we actually get a narrative of Isaiah, of what Isaiah sees and what plays out with Hezekiah. So any questions, comments, any problems before we start reading Isaiah chapter 28? Rosemary, if you'd start with these prophecies about the northern kingdom, about Ephraim, about Israel. Oh, we have a guest here. No, a guest who's usually not in person.
You're not allowed here until tomorrow night.
So we're not here tomorrow night. So, all right. So,
the proud
Rosemary.
Yeah. The proud crowns of the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is but wilted flowers on the heads of men bloated with rich food, who are overcome by wine. Lo, my Lord has something strong and mighty, like a storm of hail, a shower of pestilence, something like a storm of massive torrential rain shall be hurled with force to the ground. That sounds familiar.
Uh-huh.
Trampled underfoot.
Because of what we've been dealing with.
Because of what we're getting right now.
Yeah, right now, yes. Yeah.
Trampled underfoot shall be the proud crowns of the drunkards of Ephraim. The wilted flowers on the heads of men bloated with rich food that are his glorious beauty. They shall be like an early fig before the fruit harvest. Whoever sees it devours it while it is still in his hand.
Yeah, so you can see that the comments he's making about Ephraim, about the northern kingdom, are that they're successful and that they're rich, but it's not going to be good for them. So you can hear what he's doing already. He's playing off of the fact that everyone looks at Ephraim like they're so well off. Now, again, this is the southern kingdom. This is his kingdom, the kingdom of David, the kingdom of Judah, the kingdom that we're connected to, looking at the north and going, it's so well off there. So you can understand why when Isaiah is picking at them, he's picking at our wealthier northern neighbors and cousins, and he's making an example of them. So don't think that just because they're so well off, things are going to be well with them.
In that day, the Lord of hosts shall become a crown of beauty and a diadem of glory for the remnant of his people, and a spirit of judgment for him who sits in judgment, and of valor for those who repel attacks at the gate. But these are also muddled by wine and dazed by liquor. Priest and prophet are muddled by liquor. They are confused by wine. They are dazed by liquor. They are muddled in their visions. They stumble in judgment.
Yeah. And so there you can see, when we talk, well, that's the rhyme. Well, it's not really a rhyme, but it's shagu the shachar, which he repeats 3 times. And again, you can see what he's saying about these different powers. The king, he talked about the king up here, right? Well, he talked about it up here and then talked about the real crown as God. But he talked about the crown, he talked about priests, and he talked about prophets. He talked about the different power centers. And so they're all drunk. They're all, they're successful, but they're also drunk.
quick question.
Yeah,
Word priest
yeah.
is, right now, it's synonymous with Catholicism.
Yeah, so he's talking about Kohen, uses the word Kohen right here, Kohen Vanavi, and those are our priests. So they had priests, right? The northern kingdom had priests too.
But do we use that word now for?
No, only for people who we know are priests. I mean, we know they're Kohanim. And yeah, he's calling out these people that are messed up. Look, the Bible tells us that there are other priests, that other religions have priests. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, is called Kohen Midian. So we know that there's people that are priests of other religions. So you can be a priest of another religion. The cognate for Kohen is the same cognate as the word Khan in Arabic and Turkic languages and Eastern languages. The name Khan means that has the same root. So as in Genghis, as in Madeline. Yeah, somebody made that joke too about whether she was related to Genghis Khan, but but so sometimes the name Khan is Jewish, and then sometimes it's Muslim or Pakistani or
L-S-C-A-A-N.
correct, but with the K's. But he was Jewish. James Khan was Jewish. I know.
Was it?
Yeah. But Khans, I'm talking about Khan or K, Khkahn, right? But they're both the same. They both come from the same cognate. It's the same word. It's a priest. It's a leader. Yeah. You know what I found out? James Khan did not have a rabbi do his funeral. You know why? They didn't have one. They said, why didn't you call me? I would have come over there.
You know it?
No, I didn't.
But why didn't he? Did he name it or-
No, they said that the family said they had someone to do it, and the person didn't know what to do. By the way, I shouldn't say that. But I knew that, but I heard it from the cemetery. At Eden, he's buried in Eden. He's buried in Eden. Yeah,
He buried in Israel?
in Eden, Roman Eden. So I said, what happened? They said, well, this guy said he could do it, and he didn't know, he wasn't a rabbi, he didn't know what to do. I said, well, you should have called me. I would have come right over. Listen to me. I said, who was at that funeral? The guy said, everybody. Spielberg was there, I mean, like, they went through the list. He went through I don't know why that one stuck in my head, which is probably because of the Oscars, but they went through the list. He was like, everybody you could imagine in Hollywood was there. It was like 3 months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, 3 months ago. Anyways, yeah, he was buried in Jewish cemetery, whatever, but they didn't have a rabbi to do it. The next time you have to call me. That would have been pretty. I would have been a little overwhelmed by the people that. I know, but it still would have been a little overwhelming. It would have been overwhelming.
I have a question.
I did do Norman Fell's funeral. That's the only celebrity funeral I ever did.
I like Norman Fell.
Yeah, he was good.
He's great.
No, he's at Mount Simon.
That's what I thought.
But I got to call up John Ritter to do a eulogy, and I got to call up. Oh yeah, that was the only time where I ever felt like I was in an award ceremony as I was calling up people. I was like, now I'd like to call up John Ritter. Yeah.
Just the nicest people.
Yeah.
So sad how he died.
But that was the only time I've been done like a all celebrity thing. It's kind of weird. I don't know. I shouldn't probably say that out loud, but
My dad's, he was a celebrity.
he was a celebrity. Yes, John.
I want to backtrack.
Yes.
Because I was driving here when you were discussing it.
Yes.
In regards to Isaiah being influential.
Yeah.
Two questions.
Yeah.
Right? It's a big difference between obviously then and now, right? In regards to
Yeah.
exposure. But one, how do you support that he was influential? Was there archaeological evidence in regards?
No, because he says it.
Okay.
Oh, no. He says who he's related to. And
And it would have to have been just in the population.
and he doesn't brag about it. It's not like he's saying it like, hey, I'm related to so and so. It's that when you see when it's described, or when it was said that he said it, or when it's said about him, he didn't say, hey, I'm related. When it says that here's who Isaiah was, the reality is we're so there's also things that he sees that he would only had access to if he was in those power centers. So he's pretty wild, because he doesn't, like we sometimes think these prophets must have been these itinerant people that just show up and they're like starting to speak, and you're like, where do they even live? Everyone knew where he lived. He lived in Jerusalem. He lived in probably a really nice house. So it kind of goes against our idea that the prophets were all poor. We know they're not all poor. And by the way, the rabbis don't say they were all poor. Just kind of goes with our feeling of like what we've seen in
It's
a
just a cartoon character prophet who's, barefoot and wearing a robe and carrying a sign.
we don't have that in Judaism. There's definitely prophets who live wild lives, like Elijah that we read about, but there are other prophets that we read that they're farmers or they're businessmen, and the Bible doesn't say anything about them having necessarily had to be poor. So I guess you could say that if they were really good, they knew what the market was going to look like, and they did really well. No, but I think there's a sense that look, if you're a prophet, you're turning your life over to God, telling you to do stuff when you had to do it. And so even with Isaiah, we're told, hey, go name your kids this. God tells him, go name your kids something, that's pretty wild, assuming like it says he did it, take it on its face value. Hosea, that we're going to read about soon, God tells him to go marry a prostitute. I mean, teach him a lesson, teach everyone a lesson, not teach him a lesson,
What's the lesson?
we'll get to it when we get to Hosea. Get to Hosea when we get to it. So prophets had to do what God told them to do once they signed up for that. But the idea that they were necessarily poor as part of that it's not what the Bible says. So we have to overcome that idea that these people were necessarily, bums.
So
Not
are we,
bums,
are we making an assumption that his influence is based on the fact that he lived and resided in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was a population center where most of the people lived? Partly, but it's not just that, because we know that the relatives that he had were the relatives, when we make the connections, the relative connections that he had from the Bible, we know how powerful he was. So the fact that he is living in Jerusalem, in the places where priests are, where the places of the royal family is pretty obvious. So he doesn't, but it's more of our overcoming our stereotype or our image that this prophet had to be a poor guy, that he didn't have access, and he didn't have wealth. So it's more of our, it's more the jump of affluence and influence.
Yeah, but it's
don't have to be
no, I know, but it's more that like we have to overcome what our images of what Isaiah would have looked like or would have been, because that's what our image is in our head. I mean, that's what we're carrying. That's our baggage. That's because we've been conditioned to believe that by the movies and cartoons and things like that. So I think if you're going to talk about a modern day Isaiah, it's the guy who comes in a business suit and who's, you expect the guy in your mind, you expect the prophet to be a disheveled dude that just shows up and starts screaming. Where in reality, the guy like Isaiah would have been the guy that goes to work on Wall Street or goes to work in Hollywood and also lives in Beverly Hills and has the ability to talk to people like this, and they listen to him. They believe that he's speaking on behalf of God.
Or influence.
Yeah, and that people don't have an issue with his role. They seem to expect it. Look, the reason that priests and prophet are having access to alcohol, why you can even say that about the North, is because he's not alone. He's not the only guy who was like that. So let's take a look at, again, he's still talking about the North right now.
Yea, all tables are covered with the vomit and filth, so that no space is left. To whom would he give instruction? To whom expound a message? To those newly weaned from milk, just taken away from the breast? That same mutter upon mutter, murmur upon murmur, now here, now there.
And by the way, in Hebrew, that's kitzav litzav, tzav litzav, kan lakan, kan lakan, ko lako, zair listen. This is like, people are just babbling. They're just babbling. They're just talking.
Truly, as one who speaks to that people in a stammering jargon and an alien tongue is he who declares to them, this is the resting place, let the weary rest. This is the place of repose. They refuse to listen. To them, the word of the Lord is mutter upon mutter, murmur upon murmur, now here, now there. And so they will march, but they shall fall backward and be injured and snared and captured. Hear now the word of the Lord, you men of mockery who govern that people in Jerusalem. For you have said, we have made a covenant with death, concluded a pact with Sheol. When the sweeping flood passes through, it shall not reach us, for we have made falsehood our refuge, taken shelter in treachery.
Yeah, so now he's talking about his people. Now he's talking about the kingdom of Judah. And now he's talking about so let's look at this note right here. That's just a different way of reading it. Now he's talking to us. And he's talking to us because we've made a pact with the Egyptians. We've made a pact with the Egyptians, and he's playing on that right now. He's saying, we've made a pact with death. We made a pact with Sheol, with hell, the netherworld. Say hell, but the netherworld. We've made a pact with them. And if you think that when the flood passes through, again, using that imagery of water, when it passes through, don't think that this is going to save us.
Assuredly, thus said the Lord God, behold, I will found in Zion, stone by stone, a tower of precious cornerstones, exceedingly firm. He who trusts need not fear.
Yeah. Well, that's nice. There's a cornerstone, a precious cornerstone that's going to survive. But that's not a good thing, because that's all that's left to start over again. He's talking about Hezekiah and his group of people that will survive the Assyrian onslaught, but he's basically saying it's not going to be good. This phrase here, by the way, this phrase is a phrase of hope. So in the midst of him saying there's going to be trouble, catastrophe, disaster, he says, behold, I will find in Zion, stone by stone, a tower of precious cornerstones, exceedingly firm. Does anyone have a different translation? I know you have a different translation. Mary, you want to read what your translation is? Verse 16, the end. The word foundation.
In Zion for a foundation.
Yeah.
A stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation.
Yeah, that's the word right here that's used 2 times. Can anyone read that word in Hebrew? It's repeated twice. Mossad, which means foundation. Everyone knows what the Mossad is.
Yes.
This is where the term comes from. It comes from the Bible. It's called the foundation because it's a somewhat euphemistic name, right? But it's also because of this phrase in Isaiah. This is probably the most famous phrase we're going to read today, because it's used in other places too. It's used as a kind of a hope that, there'll be something left, and that foundation will.
Yeah, it's Mossad, but
Yeah.
it's different.
No, they translated it exceedingly firm. The word, the way they translated it in this translation is exceedingly firm.
I'm looking at the.
Yeah, Mossad.
But it's different.
Oh, it's just the vocalization. It's the vowels on it. I mean, it's the trope. The vowels are the same. The trope is different.
Okay.
It's just the way it's translated. Mossad. I mean, so it's the way it's sung, not the way it's read. The vowels themselves are the same. So they translated the word Mossad twice as exceedingly firm. It's a foundation, but it's a grammatical structure where you repeat the word twice. We do it a lot in Hebrew. Mot yumat, you surely will die, you know. Here it's just the same word. It's not even, so they translate it as exceedingly firm. The word literally means foundation. So the word Mossad means foundation. Okay, you know that. Yesod, the word Yesod in Hebrew means foundation. It's a word, we use the word for lots of things. But it's not called the foundation only because it's a euphemism, because it's like the CIA, right? It's the intelligence gathering operation for Israel. Okay. It's because of this word. And in Isaiah, what does it say afterwards? He who trusts need not fear. What's your translation, Mary?
That believe it shall not make haste.
Yeah. And so either of those kind of capture this idea, which is the truth. The word ma'amin is the word where we use the word amen, means true. Emet means truth. The truth, with the truth, you won't be afraid. So what does the Mossad do? Tries to find out the truth. Tries to find out what's really happening. That's what intelligence gathering really is. It's not just gathering information, it's trying to gather the information and trying to figure out what's really true. What's true and what's false flag, what's there to distract you, to make you not realize what's really happening, right? So that's why the Mossad is called the Mossad. It's a euphemism, but it's also from this line of Isaiah, which is also, by the way, if you look at the full context, I'm building Israel on this foundation. And one can make the argument that one of the reasons why Israel is where it is today is because it takes gathering information and intelligence to a level that it is the duty of essentially every soldier that's in Israel to gather information and to pass that on up the chain, so that every person in Israel, every soldier in Israel, every person in battle, or just an average citizen, if they see something and they have information, that they pass it on to the government. So that's where it comes from, folks. And that line is just a beautiful line too. It was used before there was a Mossad. This was used in Jewish liturgy, or not so much liturgy, but in Jewish imagery, that there'll be something left that we can build a foundation on for the future. All right. So again, this is in the midst of not good things happening here.
But I will apply judgment as a measuring line and retribution as weights. Hail shall sweep away the refuge of falsehood, and floodwaters engulf your shelter. Your covenant with death shall be annulled. Your pact with Sheol shall not endure. When the sweeping flood passes through, you shall be its victims.
Yeah, it's not good reading right now while we're getting washed away, but whatever. It's very strange.
It shall catch you every time it passes through. It shall pass through every morning, every day, and every night, and it shall be sheer horror to grasp the message. The couch is too short for stretching out, and the cover too narrow for curling up. For the Lord will arise as on the hill of Parazim. He will rouse himself as in the vale of Gibeon to do his work. Strange is his work, and to perform his task. Astounding is his task. Therefore, refrain from mockery, lest your bonds be tightened. For I have heard a decree of destruction from my Lord God of hosts against all the land. Give diligent ear to my words. Attend carefully to what I say. Does he who plows to sow plow all the time, breaking up and furrowing his land? When he has smoothed its surface, does he not rather broadcast black cumin and scatter cumin, or set wheat in a row, barley in a strip, and emmer in a patch? for he teaches him the right manner. His God instructs him. So too, black cumin is not threshed with a threshing board, nor is the wheel of a threshing sledge rolled over cumin, but black cumin is beaten out with a stick and cumin with a rod.
Okay, listen.
Okay, keep going. So what's your translation say, Mary, for cumin? Oh, it has cumin too. Yeah, so what they're talking about here is the spice, right? And how it's made. Yeah, and they're talking about how it's made and how it's planted and again, there's an analogy here to the way God is going to deal with us and deal with the land and deal with what's about to happen. So again, we talked about this in Kings, but what is happening and what Isaiah is telling people right now, which is not an easy message. Ephraim, the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Israel, called Ephraim here, one of the names for it, right? Ephraim. The northern kingdom is allied with Syria and is attacking Judah as they are being attacked by the Assyrians. So the Assyrians are attacking Ephraim and Syria, and they're attacking Judah. They're just pushing on them, and then they're pushing on us. And so what does Judah do is they turn to the Egyptians for help. And the idea of turning south is, hey, we'll turn south because the Egyptians need us as a bulwark against everyone else to the north, including the Assyrians and then the Syrians and then the kingdom of Israel. So, you know, like if you were from Judah, you would have done the same thing that the king did, which is let's make a pact with Egypt. What else are we going to do? Isaiah is saying something really hard to swallow, which is don't rely on the Egyptians. The Egyptians are not trustworthy. They're not strong enough. They're useless. So don't think that they're going to come to your aid. It's not a message that people wanted to hear because they want to hear something. They want to hear there's an answer. His answer is we're going to have to wait it out. This storm is going to come through, and we're going to have to do everything we can to survive. But don't think the help is coming from Egypt. Don't think that that's where you're saved, where you're going to be saved from. You'll be saved by God. You won't be saved by the Egyptians. So that's the message that he has here, which nobody really wants to hear that message. Nobody wants to hear that message. Because what do I do? Well, he's basically saying there's not a whole lot you can do. You're going to have to wait it out, which means you're going to have to buckle down. You're going to have to be careful, and you're going to have to not act like crazy people.
Little man building the boat up. Bunch of animals lined up.
So let's finish up this chapter.
It is cereal that is crushed, for even if he threshes it thoroughly, and the wheels of his sledge and his horses overwhelm it, he does not crush it. That too is ordered by the Lord of hosts. His counsel is unfathomable, his wisdom marvelous.
Yeah, I don't know if I like the word unfathomable. What do you have there, Mary, for your translation?
I found this on the web.
Yeah. Yeah, unfathomable assumes that it can't be known. He means marvelous. It means wonderful. Now it's repeated with his wisdom is marvelous, but marvelous there is the word higdil, which is great. So you have marvelous or wondrous and what? Mary? And excellent, yeah. Marvelous or wondrous and magnificent or large is what the word higdil means, what the word gadol. So I don't know that unfathomable is really a good translation there, because it doesn't mean that. It means it's wondrous. It doesn't mean it means it's like a miracle, miraculous, not unfathomable. But anyways, so but he's basically saying God works in mysterious ways. And you may not like that, right? You may not like this is Rebbe Sol calling me right now. Rebbe Sol he did an amazing job of leading us in music the other night with Shlomit. And that is going to be broadcast soon, but you guys got to see it live. If you were here, or you could watch it live. Some people watched it live. I know you watched it live, but it was pretty amazing. It's being edited down, and obviously we're making it less like we were there, but you were there. Some of us were there. It was great. She is great. She is really, I mean, I love that kind of music. If you don't love Yemenite music, you wouldn't have liked it. But if you like Yemenite music at all, it was pretty amazing.
Are they a couple?
No. No, she's married to a guy in New Jersey. She lives in New Jersey. They don't even live in the same state. No, he lives up north. He's a super nice guy. He's not married. No, I mean, he's not married. I think he wants to be. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. He's a single guy. He's like a musician. But I mean, he's a nice guy. He's a nice musician, I think. Anyways, so that's the prophecy against Ephraim. You need to know this next prophecy is against, or not against, it's a warning to Judah, to his own people. He calls him here Ariel, which if you look at the note here is going to say a poetic name for Jerusalem. Ariel literally means the lion of God, right? A dot Ariel in North, the lion, a lion, an Ari is a lion, Ariel. So Ariel is the lion of God. It's another name for Jerusalem. So this is against, well, it's pretty clear because he says, so where David is. Yeah, this is specifically about us. So some of the prophecies, the last one was about us too, but this one comes right out at the beginning and tells us this is about us. So the last one was about Israel, the northern kingdom. This one's about Judah. Let's look at this one.
Ariel, city where David camped, add year to year. Let festivals come in cycles, and I will harass Ariel, and there shall be sorrow and sighing. She shall be to me like Ariel, and I will let camp against you round about. I will lay siege to you with a mound, and I will set up siege works against you, and you shall speak from lower than the ground. Your speech shall be humbler than the sod. Your speech shall sound like a ghost's from the ground. Your voice shall chirp from the sod. And like fine dust shall be the multitude of your strangers, and like flying chaff, the multitude of tyrants.
Yeah, none of those things are good. This is not going to be good for Jerusalem. It's going to be destruction, right? It's going to be bad.
And suddenly, in an instant, she shall be remembered of the Lord of hosts, with roaring and shaking and deafening noise, storm and tempest and blaze of consuming fire. Then, like a dream, a vision of the night shall be the multitude of nations that war upon Ariel, and all her besiegers, and the siege works against her, and those who harass her, like one who is hungry and dreams he is eating, but wakes to find himself empty, and like one who is thirsty and dreams he is drinking, but wakes to find himself faint and utterly parched. So shall be all the multitude of nations that war upon Mount Zion.
So it's not going to be good. But what's going to happen is that it's not going to be as bad as you might think it's going to be. In the sense that what happens is that these nations are all going to come against you. They're going to go to war against you. It's going to be bad. But what they're going to find out is that you survived. So it's bad, but the outcome won't be so bad.
Act stupid and be stupefied. Act blind and be blinded. They are drunk, but not from wine. They stagger, but not from liquor. For the Lord has spread over you a spirit of deep sleep, and has shut your eyes, the prophets, and covered your heads, the seers, so that all prophecy has been to you like the words of a sealed document. If it is handed to one who can read, and he is asked to read it, he will say, I can't, because it is sealed. And if the document is handed to one who cannot read and he is asked to read it, he will say, I can't read. My Lord said, because that people has approached me with its mouth and honored me with its lips, but has kept its heart far from me, and its worship of me has been a commandment of men learned by rote. Truly, I shall further baffle that people with bafflement upon bafflement, and the wisdom of its wise shall fail, and the prudence of its prudent shall vanish. Those who would hide their plans deep from the Lord, who do their work in dark places and say, who sees us? Who takes note of us? How perverse of you! Should the potter be accounted as the clay? Should what is made say of its maker, he did not make me? And what is formed say of him who formed it, he did not understand?
So what he's saying here is that people don't know what to do right now. That's because none of you are doing the right thing. None of you are behaving the right way. You're going through the motions, you're doing your sacrifices, you're doing your stuff, but you're not paying attention. And you don't understand what God is telling you. And the prophecies that you're getting up until now, you're not interpreting them right, which of course he's saying all the other prophets that are out there that are telling you to do A, B, and C, they're all wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. So what's interesting about this is this is kind of understanding that he's giving it, that other prophets might be getting the same message, but they don't know what they're saying. They don't understand this message. And so they're interpreting it wrong. And he's telling the people, you don't get it. You don't understand it. But the message is there. It's out there. You just don't understand it. Of course, he's saying, I understand it.
Surely in a little while.
Probably again, he's speaking, no one else, the way he sees it, no one else gets it. Look, the reason we have this was because he was right and everyone else was wrong. So the reason that we read this today is because he was 100% right. And he was speaking at a time when no one else either had the courage, the ability, or the foresight, or the gifts from God to do this. So what he did took a lot of courage, because it was not the easy thing to say. And he knew what was going on. He was right in the center of power. So here's what he says.
Surely in a little while, Lebanon will be transformed into farmland, and farmland accounted as mere brush. In that day, the deaf shall hear even written words, and the eyes of the blind shall see even in darkness and obscurity. Then the humble shall have increasing joy through the Lord, and the neediest of men shall exult in the Holy One of Israel. For the tyrant shall be no more, the scoffer shall cease to be, and those diligent for evil shall be wiped out, who cause men to lose their lawsuits, laying a snare for the arbiter at the gate, and wronging by falsehood him who was in the right. Assuredly, thus says the Lord to the house of Jacob, who redeemed Abraham. No more shall Jacob be shamed, no longer his face grow pale. For when he, that is, his children, behold what my hands have wrought in his midst, they will hallow my name. Men will hallow the Holy One of Jacob and stand in awe of the God of Israel. And the confused shall acquire insight, and grumblers accept instruction.
So that's the end of that prophecy. Though it's not really the end of that theme. It's the end of the chapter. I don't know that necessarily it was the end of a prophecy. It's sometimes difficult to know where does one prophecy end, and even when we have this is a prophecy against the Egyptians, that was probably added by an editor at some point. But again, let's assume that that's a unit. Sometimes it's hard to tell us when the unit's over. So he's saying that eventually people will get it. People will understand, and things will come around. This prophecy is still about us. This is still about his neighbors, his kingdom of Judah. And again, I would probably say it's either written, this was either a continuation of the same prophecy, or again, it was Hezekiah. So Hezekiah, yeah, and this is the one that he prophesied. This is the one that he perhaps is related to. So let's take a look at his prophecies against us. Continue.
O disloyal sons, declares the Lord, making plans against my wishes, weaving schemes against my will, thereby piling guilt on guilt, who set out to go down to Egypt without asking me, to seek refuge with Pharaoh, to seek shelter under the protection of Egypt.
Yeah, so here he says flat out what they did wrong. And it's not like, it's not veiled in some kind of poetic language. It's just flat out. You went to Pharaoh, you went to Egypt. You didn't ask me. You didn't ask God, what should we do? Obviously, going back to Egypt is going back to the people who kept you as slaves. So he's going to have an issue with this for several reasons. The reason why this is a new chapter is because it's gone back to, the chapter ended with things will be okay. Even dumb people will get it, even those dumb people will understand. And now he's gone back to castigating the people for the things. But again, it also could have been part of, a style where he goes back and forth between castigating and then comforting, going back and forth. But, as a unit, somebody said, hey, it changed feeling there. And so that's the end of the chapter. But here it says flat out, you're going to Egypt, and you shouldn't have done that. And here it goes.
The refuge with Pharaoh shall result in your shame, the shelter under Egypt's protection in your chagrin. Though his officers are present in Zoan and his messengers reach as far as Hanes, they shall all come to shame because of a people that does not avail them, that is of no help or avail, but brings only chagrin and disgrace.
Yeah, so these are places you can see. Hanes is in Egypt. Hanes is in Egypt.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes, that's right. It's where the ark was taken. These are people you don't trust them. You can't trust these people. Here we go. And again, that is maybe again part of that unit. This one, well, let's take a look at it. There's definitely a phrase here, the Masah Behemot, which they translate, but Masah Behemot Negev, is seen as a description, right? And that this is a editor put in this indicator that we're now into a different thing here. Which is again, probably an indication that there was not a chapter break there, but maybe here, maybe this is a different chapter. It's difficult to know for sure, but this seems to be something specifically that had to do with the Negev, the southern part of Israel, right? That's our southern part of Judah. I say southern part of Israel today because the Negev is the southern part of Israel today on the border with Egypt. But let's take a look at this. So this was definitely seen as a editorial insertion right here. The prophecy begins Be'eretz, through a land. Here we go.
The beasts of the Negev pronouncement. Through a land of distress and hardship, of lion and roaring king beast, of viper and flying seraph, they convey their wealth on the backs of asses, their treasures on camels' humps, to a people of no avail. For the help of Egypt shall be vain and empty. Truly, I call this. They are a threat that has ceased. Now, go, write it down on a tablet and inscribe it in a record, that it may be with them for future days, a witness forever. For it is a rebellious people, faithless children, children who refuse to heed the instruction of the Lord, who said to the seers, do not see, to the prophets, do not prophesy truth to us, speak to us falsehoods, prophesy delusions. Leave the way, get off the path. Let us hear no more about the Holy One of Israel.
Yeah, so there it's specifically, you can hear him saying, you don't want the prophets to tell you the truth. You don't want to know. You actually tell your seers, don't see, don't tell us what you see. They don't want to know. And you can see again.
I can see a sort of, I won't say what, but I can see a sort of contemporary reference there.
Yes, but again, this is people saying it's about Egypt. Don't listen to those prophets that are telling you to turn to Egypt. So this is why the Negev is the link between the kingdom of Judah and Egypt. It's where you would go through. So, this is the link, this area.
Assuredly, thus said the Holy One of Israel, because you have rejected this word and have put your trust and reliance in that which is fraudulent and tortuous, of a surety, this iniquity shall work on you like a spreading breach that occurs in a lofty wall, whose crash comes sudden and swift. It is smashed as one smashes an earthen jug, ruthlessly shattered, so that no shard is left in its breakage to scoop coals from a brazier or ladle water from a puddle. For thus said my Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, you shall triumph by stillness and quiet. Your victory shall come about through calm and confidence. But you refused.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that the way to survive is by not losing and going crazy, right? Not reacting. Just keep calm, have confidence, and you don't want to do it. And again, they translate the word as confidence, calm and confidence. I guarantee that's not what the King James has. What does the King James have, Mary?
Quietness and enough.
Yeah. So, it's keeping calm and not reacting. You're going to have to wait it out. And of course, they didn't do that.
That's true. Many stressful situations.
Yep. And people don't want to hear it. But this is a really powerful thing to listen to, because again, people want to know what to do immediately. They want to react. They want to know what to do. But I have to, I had the misfortune of going into a bank yesterday.
Oh,
I had to go. I didn't have a choice. Do you know what was happening at banks yesterday across the country?
It's just silly.
people were trying to get their money out.
Literally insane. I had to go. I mean, the thing I had to do in a bank. I was like, I drove to 3 Wells Fargos yesterday to find one that didn't have a line out the door. I found one.
Getting crazy.
Well, because they are reacting. That's what happened.
Reacting without much thought.
I guarantee you, none of those people I saw online had $250,000 in the bank.
Not one of those people.
Not one of them. So
Yeah, I guarantee you.
no, it was weird. So I went to the first bank and I was like, oh, this is just a badly run bank. Then it was the one on Lyons, and then because I hate that one. And then I went to the one on Stevenson Ranch, which on Old Road, which is always empty. And that one the line was out the door, and there was one person where I was like, they only have one person there, because I know at that time there's never anybody in. I finally went to the one over by on McBean on Magic Mountain Parkway, and that one had no one. So people, Jimmy Stewart. Hey everybody, her money's not here. It's in whatever. It's in her house, yeah. It was
It was a weird day to walk into a bank. It was a weird day to walk into the bank. But anyways, so this is very powerful to read this today. Just be calm.
Yeah, me-
I didn't want to. I didn't want to.
It's
The
general.
common sense said.
Yeah.
No thoughts of taking-
And it was interesting to hear what was going on. Common sense.
Yeah. Yeah. People wanted a reaction.
Citibank.
I understand. I understand. So look, it's concerning to the people who have accounts in those. I get it. I'm not saying it's not. I understand why people were. If I had money in that bank, I would be freaking out a little bit.
That bank, absolutely.
Well, we don't, because we don't live in Mountain View. If you did, if you lived in Palo Alto, you might not feel that way.
You actually know the root of the issue. The root of the issue was the deal that the bank cut with the majority of its customers. They had to keep their capital in the bank. They could not diversify based on the money that was lent to them. So it was the deal that they took, right? It was the contract they signed. They should have all failed. Sorry, that's business.
Well, listen,
That's the deal. If I own a business, I forget it, I don't.
oh, listen, that's what, but that's what Biden said. He says, we're not going to bail it
If
out.
I offer you a deal that's one-sided, you make a decision. You're the business owner.
That's right.
You don't like it, go somewhere else.
Yeah, I would have,
There's well, that's my point.
yeah.
And so to bail them out is unreasonable.
No, people,
Not just the bank. I don't care about the depositors, everybody. That's the deal. You're insured up to this because we're the fools for diversifying. And it's
No, I
silly for the whole
wanna hear
system.
so when we
Those of us that don't have any money.
when we're in a time when people are going nuts,
We get there.
when we're in a time where people are going nuts, calm and confidence, you triumph by stillness and quiet, right?
That's true.
By keeping quiet,
That's true.
by keeping your head on,
Jimmy Stewart.
That's right. That's right. So here's what you decided you wanted to do.
No, you declared, we shall flee on steeds. Therefore you shall flee. We shall ride on swift mounts. Therefore your pursuers shall prove swift. 1,000 before the shout of one. You shall flee at the shout of 5, till what is left of you is like a mast on a hilltop, like a pole upon a mountain. Truly, the Lord is waiting to show you grace. Truly, he will arise to pardon you. For the Lord God is a God of justice. Happy are all who wait for him.
Yeah, and this is an interesting message that we even saw in our Wednesday night class when we talked about and then Leviticus. It talks about the things that are going to happen when God loses patience with us, which is that,
Wasn't the
one
flood-
person, 5 people will scare away 1,000,
Well, the flood was one of his, that he was mad at the people.
Yes. But when we talk about people going to war, if one person can scare away 1,000, then, and this is what's happening to you now. You're on the wrong end of this. So, but things would be okay if you calm down, right? If you turn back to God.
Story
Yeah.
of my life.
Yep. Here's the line.
Indeed, O people in Zion, dwellers of Jerusalem, you shall not have cause to weep. He will grant you his favor at the sound of your cry. He will respond as soon as he hears it. My Lord will provide for you meager bread and scant water. Then your guide will no more be ignored, but your eyes will watch your guide. And whenever you deviate to the right or to the left, your ears will heed the command from behind you. This is the road, follow it. And you will treat as unclean the silver overlay of your images and the golden plating of your idols. You will cast them away like a menstruous woman. Out, you will call to them.
Yep. Yeah, your idolatry.
So rain shall be provided for the seed with which you sow the ground, and the bread that the ground brings forth shall be rich and fat. Your livestock in that day shall graze in broad pastures. As for the cattle and the asses that till the soil, they shall partake of salted fodder that has been widowed with shovel and fan. And on every high mountain and on every lofty hill, there shall appear brooks and watercourses on a day of heavy slaughter when towers topple. And the light of the moon shall become like the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall become sevenfold like the light of the 7 days when the Lord binds up his people's wounds and heals the injuries it has suffered.
Yeah, and that's a famous phrase too, that there'll be a time when the light of the moon will be like the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be even brighter. Now, that sounds like that would be really bad. We'd go all get burned up. But this is at a time when people don't look at the sun and the moon like they are planetary heavenly bodies, in the sense that they are lights, right? These are lights, and they shine on us. That's good when they shine on us. And so this is what people then apply towards heaven. What heaven would be like is that heaven would be light. So this is how you start to get people's vision of heaven being a place of light. So yeah, the moon shines like the sun, and the sun like lots of suns. So it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. As you can see, because this is when God binds up our wounds and heals the injuries. Yeah.
When the Shabbat comes?
No, but it is where some of the things that are applied to Jesus come from, or the Messiah, which is that God will bind up our wounds, which is a time when, God will heal us.
But this is 740 BC.
Yeah. So it also tells you that people were talking about, at least Isaiah was talking about this a long time ago. Isaiah might have been the first person, or he's the first person we know of that talks like this. So
So how do you connect Jesus to something that was 700?
well, here's the interesting thing.
Almost 1,000 years.
Yeah, so that means that it was talked about a long time before Jesus. There are other people who say, well, if Isaiah is only 700 years before Jesus, he's 500 years after Moses. I don't know that, the fact that it's 500 years after Moses, it's still a long, long time ago. It's still, again, 700 years before Jesus, but it is old. I mean, it's really old. So there are some people who say, well, if Jews didn't talk about God in these ways until the time of Isaiah, that means they didn't believe it, or they didn't talk about it, or they didn't have a language for that kind of discussion about God during the time of Moses. That may or may not be the case, but so what? I mean, people will say, well, they didn't talk about God this way until 700 BC instead of 1200 BC or 2000 BC, but so what? It's still 700 years before Jesus. It's still 2,700 years ago. It's still long before any other people that we've ever read about talk about God like this. In the sense that, again, people had gods. The Greeks had gods, which are actually, this is even older than Homer's stuff. But there are other gods. The Babylonians had gods, the Egyptians had gods. But the gods don't do this kind of thing. The gods don't bind up people's wounds. This is a God that cares about people and actually heals them. For the most part, that doesn't seem like the descriptions that these other people had about their gods. But again, there are people who diminish it by saying that it's not until Isaiah that we have it. We don't have it in Moses's descriptions.
But isn't there a theory that there was this axial age over the whole world, that where we got compassionate religions everywhere?
This is still earlier than that. Yes, but this is still early, right? So this is still, okay. So maybe it's 200 years before, it's 200 years before Buddha and 200 years before, people start talking about this in other cultures. But so what? Yes. So maybe, yes, there is a theory that 700 years of BCE that this is like this, and that 700 years later you had Christianity. 700 years after that you had Islam. 700 years after that you had the Reformation. So yes, there's people who say that there's roughly 700-year cycles when it comes to religion. That religion goes through, there are religious movements that are, as Rosemary said, the theory is that they're worldwide changes to religion. I don't know that there was a worldwide change in Islam other than it did spread throughout parts of the world that they didn't have that religion, but I don't know that Islam added another layer to, but I mean, it's interesting because it was a worldwide religious phenomenon. All it means, by the way, Rosemary, is that we're due for one right now,
Really.
right?
Before,
I wasn't thinking about the cyclical nature. I was only thinking about the worldwide at that time.
Yeah, but if it happens every 700 years, we're due now. The last one was the Protestant Reformations, those times in the 1500s.
I have thought that we need a lot of our theories of like politics are obsolete and we need a new one.
Look, these changes that have happened religiously have happened roughly on 600, 700-year cycles. So if we're up for another cycle, it's not quite 500 years, it's about 700 years. So if Isaiah is living during that period where people are doing that, I mean, you brought it up, Rosemary. I'm only saying, yes, it's a possibility.
I'm
I
not
thought
arguing.
about it. It just means that the
Oh,
consequence
serious.
is that Islam was one of those then, which happened around 700, 600 of the Common Era. And then if you fit that into it, then the Protestant Reformation was the last one, and that we're due one right about now within the next 100 years. So is it possible? I think it is possible. But I think the next religious movement, the next religious upheaval will be based around technology and, changes to what we have to do, how we have to reapproach life and death in 100 years or so.
This is all those Star Trek episodes where people are worshiping an AI.
Well, yeah, but that is the issue, is if we get to a point where there's a singularity or there's people that are uploading their consciousness to something else, or the idea of death isn't what people have had for thousands of years, it would precipitate a new approach to religion.
I was hoping that see, so we're studying this, we know that we were before Christianity, but why did it come around to hate Christianity? Why did it come around to hate the Jews, for the Islam?
That's an interesting question, Doreen, but it has to do with lots of things. But I think to answer your question in one sentence, because you always have to destroy what came before, right? In order to say that you are needed, you're only needed if what happened before didn't work. So which begs an interesting question. If the next religious upheaval happens, will it happen with the understanding by the newest version of whatever this religious movement would look like, that all previous religious movements are useless and worthless? Generally speaking, that's what happens.
There's
Okay,
only so
fine.
many ways that
When
people
the
can deal
Protestant
with
Reformation
cognitive
happened,
dissonance.
When the Protestant Reformation happened, it didn't happen without a lot of bloodshed. There was something we sometimes refer to as the war in Germany that lasted for 100 years, where Protestants and Catholics were murdering each other up until the 1900s. So, I mean, it doesn't happen without violence. Yeah, Islam was a completely political religious phenomena where people had to convert to Islam, otherwise they got their heads chopped off. So these are real issues, and they're ones that I can't imagine that the next religious upheaval won't come with bloodshed as well, and with what you asked, Doreen, which is why? Because you have to destroy what came before, because what came before cannot be acceptable anymore. It's not necessary. It's evil. It's useless. It's been replaced. And then you have to replace it. So the question is, can you replace it with any other way other than obliterating what happened, what the possessors of that information? I don't want to be here for that. Yeah.
That begs the question then. God, Adonai, right? Knew that all the laws and all the rules were going to be so strict, right? To almost force, right, these transformational changes. Why implement that? If he knew that people could not adhere to such strict regulations.
Well, listen, Judaism doesn't hold that they can't. Judaism holds it. Judaism, even Orthodox Judaism, will tell you that it's there for us to live by. It's there for us. It's not there for us not to do, but that they're definitely, Judaism has for at least the last 2,000 years, since Christianity started, has said, yes, the principles, the mitzvot, are a challenge that a lot of people can't do. So it becomes this issue, but it isn't that we don't try, right? So the issue is that, you know, what, even again, Orthodox Jews will tell you, if you don't perform a mitzvah now, it's not that you never will do it. It's that you, like somebody says, you never say, I don't keep kosher. You say, I don't keep kosher yet. Now that's the difference, is that somebody no, I'm telling you, that's what a legitimate Orthodox teacher will tell you. That's the way you say it. You don't say, I don't keep kosher. You say, I don't keep kosher yet. So nobody says, well, it's impossible for you to do. You just say, hey, look, this is where I'm at. This is where, but yes, it is a challenge. And so Judaism does force us to understand that there has to be discipline. There has to be some accountability. Now, Judaism puts it in the form of mitzvot, the ritual commandments and the ways that we live our lives. You can call them arbitrary, but the fact is that there's a reason that they're there, because they help us keep our lives from going off the rails. Now, some of them are silly, right? Some of you go like, I don't get that. But the reality is that it's not, I don't, first of all, I'm not, who am I to judge what's silly or not? But the other issue is that I know that there's a logic to it, because I know that human behavior being what it is, that if we don't have rules, then we go crazy. So you could say, yeah, keeping kosher is stupid, because who cares what you eat? Well, okay, fine. But I do know that I have to discipline myself when I eat. Otherwise, I'm going to sit down like I did yesterday at Cheesecake Factory and eat a loaf of bread for no reason other than I wanted to. Now it's kosher. Well, I guess it's not kosher. It's not a kosher restaurant, but nothing I ate was unkosher. Nothing I had pork in it, but it was a lack of discipline. So the reality is that kashrut teaches me that, yeah, I have to have discipline with what I eat. Some of it is based on my tradition, based on what my ancestors have done for thousands of years. But it all relies on the understanding that if I don't discipline myself, I will hurt myself, because I can rationalize and I can justify and I can do anything I can to eat whatever I want. And all I'm doing is hurting myself. But I know it. I knew it. I knew it at the time. You know what I did? I had a Coke Zero.
That balanced it.
It's the stupidest thing you can possibly say. But I did. And I didn't have cheesecake when I finished.
But that dovetails into something we discussed maybe a month ago in Wednesday night class in Leviticus. And I'm not going to mention what we were talking about, because that's not the point. The point is, and what you said to me stuck with me, is you don't get to cherry pick your rules. You don't get to cherry pick. You either live by them or you don't, but you don't get to pick one over the other, right? It's either all or none.
Yeah, but being all or none doesn't mean that if you don't do one, you're not doing any of them. It's that I don't say I throw that one out because I don't get it and I don't understand it. It's like, I don't understand it now. I don't understand the logic of it, but I understand it. And I say, look, you know what was a really hard law to follow 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago? Don't have an idol. Don't have an idol. He just said your idols are going to be worthless. The gold and the silver on your idols is going to be worthless. He just said that. Well, guess what? He said it because everyone had it. They all had idols. And so he had to remind people, you know, your stupid idols that you have, they're worthless. He said it because they had it. So these laws are there because people had a hard time following them. And guess what? I don't have a hard time not having an idol. You don't have a hard time not having. None of you have ever been, I really want to have an idol. I know I'm not supposed to have an idol. We don't even think about it today because idolatry is frowned upon by pretty much everybody. Not everybody. I'm not going to say everybody, but most of us would say, I don't worship idols. And I don't feel any pressure because my neighbor doesn't worship an idol. But when everyone had an idol, it was a tough law to follow. Really tough law to follow. They couldn't follow it. None of these people could follow it. So it's interesting what we think of as a hard law for us to follow today. Yeah, it's a hard law for us to follow, you know, what we eat. You know, but if you live in Israel, it ain't hard to follow because guess what? Every restaurant you go into is a kosher restaurant. So it's not hard. It's not hard to eat kosher because there's kosher McDonald's in Israel. So it depends on where you live. It depends on your circumstances and it depends on what you think about. It's not hard for me anymore to keep kosher because I became a vegetarian 28 years ago. If I hadn't, it would have been harder. It was harder. 28 years. This October will be 29 years. So no one thought I had the discipline to do it. I didn't know. When I made the decision, everyone said, hey, I'll give them a week. I don't know. It's the hardest. I mean, it was the most discipline that I've ever applied to myself. But again, who am I to decide what's a hard law to follow and what's not? For me, it is. For me, this is or that is. As I said, it's not hard for me to anymore, but I guess before I was a vegetarian, it was a hard thing for me to wrap my head around. Kashrut.
But the creation of new religions, there has to be a reason, right? Not just Christianity and Islam, but the other ones as well, right? There has to be a reason. And so my argument is that the rules of Judaism are just too strict.
Yeah, it's a good point. The rules are hard.
Let me follow that up. And if so, God should have known that.
Well,
because right, I went back to Genesis as we're reading this, and right, you know, it's Genesis 5 even, right, where the floods come. It wasn't but how long before the floods came?
so
I'm trying to figure it out in the timeline. It doesn't
so
say.
well, no, but it doesn't matter. I mean, even if the flood happened 2,000 years after Adam, okay, the reality was it was 10 generations. That's what the Bible says. It's 10 generations. So yeah, people have, I think what will happen is that people will be forced to come to terms with the world as they live it. And then that'll force, you know, a new religious thing to, I mean, we kind of went off the rails on that, but I do know it wasn't it's this issue of religion. What does religion do? And Judaism is always, for at least the last 2,000 years, it's had an issue, which it made the boundary to come into Judaism harder by the rules that were there, which is what Christianity did do, which is it made Jewish ethics available to Gentiles in a way that didn't force them to have ritual. There's a trade-off. There's a trade-off for it. And the trade-off may have been was definitely too much for our ancestors to accept, which is that we couldn't accept any other power besides God. And the other trade-off to some extent is if you don't have ritual, what do you have? If religion doesn't have ritual, it's missing a component. And not that Christianity didn't soon have ritual, they did. Catholic tradition is built on ritual, but it didn't have, in its essence, Christianity, and that's the argument that Protestantism had, You don't have to have the ritual. You don't have to have a ritual, which is why you have mega churches today that have virtually no ritual. The most popular forms of Christianity today are completely devoid of ritual. There's no ritual. There's no ritual at a mega church. There's no ritual. So I'm not saying anything you don't understand. There's no ritual there. It works fine. More Americans go to mega churches than all the other churches combined. But it's completely devoid of ritual.
How does the rabbinical leadership in all the countries that have Jews, how do they come to terms with this?
They basically say the fact that most religion today, most religious leaders in Judaism, the centers of religion in Judaism today basically say, if you want to follow the mitzvot, if you want to go up to that bar, great. If not, that's cool.
Is that how Reformed Judaism came about?
No, Reformed Judaism came about for that issue of Jews feeling that they didn't have to follow all the rituals that were a barrier to them to enter regular society, regular society. You could still be Jewish and not have to follow those rituals that separated you from your neighbor. That's why Reformed Judaism started. It's a different attempt. But what Orthodoxy, what other forms of Judaism, what to some extent Reformed Judaism would say today, if you want to follow the mitzvot, join us. But if you're not interested in mitzvot, there's no reason to be Jewish. You don't have to be Jewish. So this is the challenge that Judaism has. Is how do you say to people, well, the mitzvot are important. I like to say this, and I'll finish with this. The mitzvot are important to me from this standpoint. Rituals are important because they are the way that we pass the values to the next generation. So if you don't have a ritual, you really don't have anything to wrap the meaning up in. You can say that these are important values. You can say that these are important, aspects or principles of who we are. But if you don't have a ritual to wrap it up in, it doesn't get passed. So you say to your kids, these are important things for us. We have these values that we have, freedom, the dignity of a human being, all these kinds of things, life, all these things that are Jewish values that are important. They're values and other traditions, don't get me wrong. But if you don't have a ritual that wraps it up, how do you tell that to them? You just say, that's important. But if you have a ritual, if you have a holiday like Passover, which celebrates freedom, the idea that no one should be a slave. Now you have an annual holiday where we discuss that, we celebrate it, we think about it, eat it.
It's ritualized.
It's ritual. It's all ritual. So what I tell people is this: think about Jewish ritual this way. Jewish ritual, and it goes for any ritual. It's not us. Jewish ritual is the envelope that the letter comes in. Not everyone knows the letter is what really is important. The message is what's important. But if you don't have an envelope, it doesn't get there. You could have the greatest message in the world, but if you write a letter, the analogy doesn't even work anymore because no one sends letters. But the analogy is that I use, that I came up with. I don't know if anyone else has ever said this, but this is what I tell people. If you wrote a really nice letter to someone and stuck it in the mail, it doesn't get there unless there's an envelope. It's got to be a stamp. There's got to be something inside it. There's got to be something surrounding it. Now, you could toss the envelope away after it's done, but then how does it get to how does it get onto anyone else? The only way the envelope, the only way the message gets transferred is with the envelope. So the envelope's important. It's critical. First of all, it has the stamp. You can see where it went from. You can see it was transmitted from one person to the other. And so if we throw away the envelope, the message never can get there. So that's why it's important for that envelope to be there. The ritual has to be there because otherwise it doesn't get to the next generation. If I don't have a holiday, if I don't have a way of wrapping that message, I ain't going to get there. So that's one of the reasons why I tell people, be very careful about abandoning ritual, because you can say, well, I taught my kids this, but if you don't teach them from the ritual, they may hear it, but they have no way of getting it to their kids. They have no way of passing it on. So that envelope, I don't know about you, but if I find a letter, and I found letters before, I collect books, and I find letters inside the books. I always love finding those. They're like a little treasure. And I look at the envelope too. I never would throw away the envelope. Would you? First of all, it's got a stamp from probably 100 years ago, which I think is cool. But I look at that envelope and I see who wrote it. Where did the letter come from? Who did it come from? Where did it come from?
That's
So-
happening today, though. People are throwing that envelope.
They throw the envelope away. They don't even know that it came in an envelope. So that's the problem. And that's why the leaving behind of ritual. And by the way, that goes for anything. I mean, that goes for American holidays, that goes for any holiday or ritual. If you give up that ritual, you're not going to have that message passed on. So
I mean, look at it from a different religion like Christianity, and kids just care about, presents on Christmas Day.
well,
They don't know the ritual.
the problem is that a lot of the rituals in Protestant churches were carried on by the individual church. And that's what people don't understand is, and that's what, I spent time with my friend John Shaver from a Methodist church. The problem is that the churches passed on those rituals. People went to the same church that their parents went to and their grandparents went to. And there was ritual even in the individual church and in the individual community, because people knew that ritual. They knew that those traditions, and it's gone.
Look at
And that was the pact. That was the pact that mega churches made with the devil, if you will, because they destroyed the ability for people to have any ritual. They go to whatever church has the best pastor, has the best music, and there is no ritual anymore. And that's devastating. And now we're seeing the fruits of that, which is that Christianity in America is dying because there is no tradition anymore. And the traditions in Protestant tradition, again, were not necessarily ritual like they are in Catholic traditions, but they were there. Each church had their own traditions. Their communities had their traditions, and that's been destroyed. And that's very, very sad. And we'll pay the price. We'll pay the price for that.
England. The English royalty.
Yeah,
What's the purpose of having a king and queen?
yeah,
But it's just full of ritual.
yeah, it is. We saw that at the funeral. So people understand that, and they understand it, but it's in some ways it's too late, unfortunately. So there you have it. You heard my message of the envelope. And understand. I don't have a good one. I don't have a good one.
But I like that, your idea that you talked about, it. Very nice to hear.
Yeah, the envelope, you're right. That's why I said the analogy isn't, it doesn't even mean anything anymore. It doesn't, I know.
Go to a kid, they say, "What's that?"
I lost it,
Yeah.
which by the way is actually a sad thing, because again, that's another loss of a tradition, right? Another loss of a ritual. We don't get letters anymore.
I love getting letters.
Letters were great to have. What?
I say.
I know you do. You're a traditionalist. You are, but there aren't a lot of people that do that. And there also are not, there aren't even wedding invitations anymore.
No, it's all.
Really?
Online.
Very rarely. Well, 1 out of 10
You know,
weddings.
Because look at the cost of a stamp of that little envelope that you opened from 100 years ago, and look at the cost of the stamp today. And then look at the cost of the materials that go into it. People would rather save the $1,000. Because if you have 400 or 500 people, or 300 people, 500 people, the stamp, the letter,
Yeah.
the time.
I
It's the
think,
supply chain.
I think people also though, look at it as a, they don't see the value of it. They don't see the value.
My
of it.
kids are sending out wedding invitations.
It is a,
That's interesting too, because even the wedding invitations are modified now. Go to the website for all the information, right? And sometimes it's even RSVPs, and I mean, it's just much, I agree with you.
listen, I'm the kind of person that would save something like that, But then again, that's why
Even how to
my
adjust
wife
the
doesn't like my hoarding. Anyways, there you have it, folks. We went off topic, but very important. And
Mark,
again,
you believe that the pendulum can swing back. You said it's too late. I just will never believe it's too late. I believe.
no, wait, hold it a second. It's too late for our society. It's not too late for you and your family. It's not too late for you and your family. It's too late for society as a whole. Our society we've crossed the, it's already, I don't want to use the different things that we've crossed, the Rubicon, we've crossed it's already been, we've crossed the line. There's too many, the vast majority of people in this country don't even understand they don't even understand the reference anymore. So I don't think it can, we're not going back. The question's only whether we can survive what the consequences of this is.
A huge, totally right Protestant.
It's not, it's an illusion, Marcia.
I think you could be right.
It's 100% an illusion. And what you're seeing is an illusion because it's not, because we've made people who have ritual feel stupid. So you know what? We're going to deal with the consequences of it. It's not like some other country is doing a better job of that than we are. So I'm not saying it's Americans are idiots. It's the entire world has done it.
I think that it's an interesting dichotomy because, I mean, I'm experiencing it. I'm sure most of you are too. My relationship and then my relationship with my children, you know, and my children are trying to keep some of it, but some of it is out the window.
So
You know that.
but you'll see what happens. All you can do is work on your family. It's all you can do.
That's good. You're right.
It's all you can do. I don't, like I said, hopefully your family and enough of us will survive through whatever the consequences of this are. And we don't know. I don't want to scare people. We don't know what the consequences of them are. We don't know that it's going to be devastating. We don't know whether it's going to be, I'm not saying it's apocalyptic. I just know that there's a consequence to this. There's consequences to this because things move and things change. And if people aren't prepared for it, we see what happens in what Isaiah just said, which is that people go crazy. I don't know that it will look like what we have today, but there will be something. And the question is, will it be something that we can withstand? Will the future generations be able to withstand it? And will it be a good change or will it be a bad change?
Mike, we're gonna all have to take LSD to figure
We
that
won't
out.
be here. till we won't.
Probably won't.
Take the book down.
But we do care, by the way. We do care about it. All right. Well, let's finish up with a little bit more Isaiah today. We're going to get through to chapter 31, probably. It's okay. Very important discussion because this is what Isaiah is actually talking about in his day, 700 BC.
Behold, the Lord himself comes from afar in blazing wrath with a heavy burden, his lips full of fury, his tongue like devouring fire, and his breath like a raging torrent reaching halfway up the neck to set a misguiding yoke upon nations and a misleading bridle upon the jaws of peoples. For you there shall be singing as on a night when a festival is hallowed. There shall be rejoicing as when they march with flute, with timbrels and with lyres to the rock of Israel on the mount of the Lord. For the Lord will make his majestic voice heard and display the sweep of his arm in raging wrath, in a devouring blaze of fire, in tempest and rainstorm and hailstones. Truly, Assyria, who beats with a rod, shall be cowed by the voice of the Lord. And each time the appointed staff passes by, the Lord will bring down his arm upon him and will do battle with him as he waves it. The Tophet has long been ready for him. He too is destined for Melech. His fire pit has been made both wide and deep, with plenty of fire and firewood, and with the breath of the Lord burning in it like a stream of sulfur.
Yeah. So what is this last part talking about? Whoa. Let's look at exactly what they're talking about here, because some of us may remember this. A site near Jerusalem in which human beings were sacrificed by fire. Yeah. Yep. And this is the god that they were worshiping, Molech, that we read about in Leviticus and elsewhere. This is where people were sacrificing humans to gods, pagan gods, to Canaanite gods. The word Melech or Molech means king, right? It's the same word that we use. Yeah. And it's basically saying that God's going to destroy people just like you've been destroying people and burning people up, God's going to destroy all that stuff. That is been the bad stuff that you shouldn't have been doing. So, again, Assyrians, they're bad. They've been bad. They're tough, but they're going to be destroyed. They'll be done. And again, for people in the future, for people as they have in the past, Isaiah's words are going to give them confidence and hope. Let's go back to Isaiah's issue here.
Those who go down to Egypt for help and rely upon horses. They have put their trust in abundance of chariots, in vast numbers of riders, and they have not turned to the Holy One of Israel. They have not sought the Lord.
So again, pretty clear. They're going to the Egyptians and they're not turning to God.
But he too is wise. He has brought on misfortune and has not canceled his word. So he shall rise against the house of evildoers and the allies of the workers of iniquity. For the Egyptians are man, not God, and their horses are flesh, not spirit. And when the Lord stretches out his arm, the helper shall trip, and the helped one shall fall, and both shall perish together.
Yep, I love that line. Yeah, the Egyptians have horses and chariots. They've always had horses and chariots, going back to the Red Sea, right? And remember how well those worked out for the Egyptians, their horses and chariots. So the horses are pretty scary, but they're just flesh. And again, the Egyptians are man, they're not God. So don't think that the Egyptians are that powerful.
For thus the Lord has said to me, as a lion, a great beast, growls over its prey, and when the shepherds gather in force against him, is not dismayed by their cries, nor cowed by their noise. So the Lord of hosts will descend to make war against the mount and the hill of Zion.
John, what are you going to say?
No.
Okay.
Just Google it out.
All right.
Like the birds that fly, even so will the Lord of hosts shield Jerusalem, shielding and saving, protecting and rescuing. Return, O children of Israel, to him whom they have been so shamefully false. For in that day everyone will reject his idols of silver and idols of gold, which your hands have made for your guilt. Then Assyria shall fall, not by the sword of man. A sword not of humans shall devour him. He shall shrivel before the sword, and his young men pine away. His rock shall melt with terror, and his officers shall collapse from weakness, declares the Lord, who has a fire in Zion, who has an oven in Jerusalem.
Yep. So that's a very short chapter. Basically, God is going to destroy the Assyrians. And again, as scary as they are, and they have a scary army, the Assyrians, it's going to amount to nothing. So we're going to finish up with chapter 32 today, which will take us right up to the Assyrian, to the text. If you look at chapter 33, so this is a normal length chapter. Oh, sorry. Wait a second. Oh, you know what? Chapter 30.
In Jerusalem.
Chapter 36.
Horrible image in my
Yes.
head.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah. Well, it's in this case, it's a destructive force. Yeah, it's a destructive force. So no, we're going to read. We'll read this chapter. Yeah, next week we'll get to chapter 36. So next week we'll probably finish up first Isaiah. So our goal is to kind of get through chapter 39 next week, which is the end of the first section of Isaiah, the first author, as some people say, of Isaiah. So here we will read, we'll read chapter 32 now, and then we will finish with that today.
Behold, a king shall reign in righteousness, and ministers shall govern with justice. Every one of them shall be like a refuge from gales, a shelter from rainstorms, like brooks of water in a desert, like the shade of a massive rock in a languishing land.
Yeah, so that's a really good prophecy to begin with. A king shall reign in righteousness. A king will reign in justice. That's a really good thing. And of course, he's talking about Hezekiah.
Then the eyes of those who have sight shall not be sealed, and the ears of those who have hearing shall listen. And the minds of the thoughtless shall attend and note, and the tongues of mumblers shall speak with fluent eloquence. No more shall a villain be called noble, nor shall gentleman be said of a knave. For the villain speaks villainy and plots treachery, to act impiously, and to preach disloyalty against the Lord, to leave the hungry unsatisfied, and deprive the thirsty of drink. As for the knave, his tools are knavish. He forges plots to destroy the poor with falsehoods, and the needy when they plead their cause. But the noble has noble intentions and is constant in noble acts. You carefree women, attend, hear my words. You confident ladies, give ear to my speech. In little more than a year you shall be troubled, O confident ones, when the vintage is over and no ingathering takes place. Tremble, you carefree ones. Quake, O confident ones. Strip yourselves naked. Put the cloth about your loins. Lament upon the breasts for the pleasant fields, for the spreading grapevines. For my people's soil, it shall be overgrown with briars and thistles. Aye, and for all the houses of delight, for the city of mirth. For the castle shall be abandoned, the noisy city forsaken. Citadel and tower shall become bare places forever, a stamping ground for wild asses, a pasture for flocks. Till a spirit from on high is poured out on us, and wilderness is transformed into farmland, while farmland rates as mere brush. Then justice shall abide in the wilderness, and righteousness shall dwell on the farmland. For the work of righteousness shall be peace, and the effect of righteousness, calm and confidence forever.
And again, there's that phrase again, calm and confidence. Sheket and betach, which could also be security. In Hebrew, the word betach means security.
Doesn't sheket mean be quiet?
And sheket means calm, right? Quiet. Yeah. Which is what the King James says, doesn't it? It says quiet.
Quietness and assurance.
Yeah. So betach means confidence, security. Means when we say actually in Hebrew it means a few things. Betach means when you say betach to someone in Hebrew, it means yeah, that's right. For sure. It means for sure. But it also bitachon in Hebrew means security. So when they talk about security in Israel, the word also has this idea of, that's why it's translated as confidence, but it's also security. It's also knowing that, you know, you're safe. So this is the idea of what happens when things are in the way they should be. There's justice, there's righteousness, there's peace, there's calm. And again, Isaiah is saying it's not going to be like that coming up. But if you hold your cool, if you relax, it will come back to that. It's a very hard message to give to people when they're going nuts because they want to know the answer. What do we do? Who do we turn to? What do we do now? And he's basically just saying, just wait it out, be calm, don't give up, don't lose your faith. Things will happen and it'll be okay. And it doesn't look like it now, but that'll be what'll happen. And he says it's going to be bad. It's not like he says it's not going to be bad. He says it's going to be bad. He tells people it's going to look like disaster. It's going to, like he said last week, it's going to look like everything's turned upside down. But don't give up.
Then my people shall dwell in peaceful homes, in secure dwellings, in untroubled places of rest. And the brush shall sink and vanish, even as the city is laid low. Happy shall you be who sow by all waters, who send out cattle and asses to pasture.
Yeah. And so what, of course, this is saying is, in a beautiful way, things will be okay. Look, Isaiah uses all different types of imagery. He uses the natural world. He uses, waters and mountains, and he uses agricultural things. He talked about cumin seed and cereal grains, and he used those as images. He uses all of these things as different images. Animals he uses, and he uses all this poetic and visual imagery. But what he, and again, here he's using agriculture, sowing by waters, and cattle and asses to pasture. These are all symbols of stability. And so he's telling people, in a beautiful poetic way, things will be okay. And so again, there's a lot of imagery. It happened in this time. He's talking about, animals and agriculture. But again, these are the places, or these are the things that people would see in their minds, and he knew what he could do, which is make these prophecies relevant and make them understandable to his audience. So that's what he did.
Brother,
Yeah.
when he says at 18, then my people shall dwell in people. He's saying his people, he's saying God's people, right? Prophesizing God's people.
It's interesting. It doesn't have a capital M. Does yours have a capital M, Mary, in the King James? King James either? This is in my, no, it says Ami is my people. So the understanding here is
Isaiah's people, I
his
guess.
people. Yeah, he's talking about Isaiah, he's talking about his people, which is why it's not a capital M. So in verse 18, he's saying, then my people shall dwell. So that's Ami, bet Ami, right? On my people. So they will be in peaceful homes and secure dwellings. And again, that word betach here, betachim, are peaceful, secure places. And menucha means rest, places of rest. So these are all, he's saying, things will get, what's going on out there? It's chaos. It's chaos. But yeah. So this is why.
To me, because
You think
it's a prophecy. It's not his.
You think it should only be for it should be for God's people.
Well, what I think, I'm just saying, to me, it's confusing.
No,
What's his purpose on earth? If he's a prophet, he's in the Old Testament. He doesn't speak on behalf of himself. He's speaking on behalf of God.
God, yeah.
That's my God. But
No. I think it's a good. Listen, it's a good thought. But it also shows that he's personally vested in it. The counter argument would be is he's personally vested in this. He cares about his people. Yeah. Well, thank you, Rosemary, for getting us through these chapters. Next week, we're going to read 33 through 39. We're going to read these last chapters. And as you see right about here, you can see it changes from prophecy to right here to in the 14th year of King Hezekiah. We're going to read this part right here. It's 36, 37, 38. So if you want to go back and you want to read, chapters 23 of, let's see, chapter 36 is, it's this chapter in Kings. You can go back and read Kings.
to see the time of Hezekiah. Right about here. So look at this. Chapter 19 of Kings. Isaiah the son of Amoz sent this message to Hezekiah. There's the other part. There's the other part. So this is very rare in the Bible
And
that you see
this is
reference.
Hezekiah, right?
Yep, this is Isaiah
And the Dead
talking to
Sea Scrolls,
Hezekiah.
right, are Carbon dated 125 years prior, right? So
No, 120, not prior to this, 125 years prior to Jesus.
right, the reign of Hezekiah.
No, Hezekiah is 730, 600 years before the Dead Sea Scrolls. So Hezekiah,
But-
we have evidence for Hezekiah.
And that's the time of Isaiah.
Yes, and we have evidence for that. Hezekiah's tunnel was built by Hezekiah.
Even more than that.
Yes. 600 years before the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we know that this stuff happened. All right, my friends, we will see you next Tuesday. We have services on Friday with Rick and Addie. We do not have Wednesday. Not here.
Well, nothing.
No, not that.
Okay.
You said that. I didn't.
I don't care. I have a question.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks. I didn't want to just one thing.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Yeah. You may not have the answer to it, but I get
It's
it,
good
right?
to see you anyway. Give me a hug.
But I'm not going to. Yeah. Story. If there's evidence.
Why have I got the end meeting for all screen?
Oh, wait a second. Sorry.
You made me the host.
No, I. Where they go?
I have-